Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment of our program is brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Temperatures cooling, leaves changing. Sevier County is beautiful this time of the year up there in the Smoky Mountains. Vol football is here too, obviously. Well, if you can't get into Neyland Stadium because they're not selling as many tickets this year, you can still have a big football weekend. Just rent yourself a cabin in the Smokies, make a weekend of it. Get up there at Parkside Cabin Rentals. Nobody does the cabin rental business better than these guys that have been doing it since the park opened. The Ogle family knows what they're doing up there. They've got all kinds, dozens and dozens of layouts of their cabins. Check them out online. You can see all those layouts. ParksideCabinRentals.com. All right, time to discuss the road ahead for the Volunteers. Here's the SEC scoreboard from yesterday. I'll just open up your mics and let you go. What stood out to you in terms of Tennessee foes looking better or worse than you expected?
I'll take the two that look worse. Georgia, their quarterback situation is a concern. They benched their starter. They had to go with a backup, a guy that had been with the program, left, came back, and they didn't. Were they down 7-5 at halftime?
Yeah.
So that's one of them. And Texas A&M would be another one. They were in a 7-5 game against Vanderbilt. I think those two were on offense were terrible. And after watching this guy play, I just think Kellen Mond's the most overrated player in the SEC. I just don't think he's that good.
Vanderbilt fans would agree. He didn't look that great last night. And here's the thing. He didn't look great against Vanderbilt, a Vanderbilt team that lost a ton of players that just walked away. You got to wonder how much they were into this season going in, entering the year. Yep. So for Texas A&M to struggle the way they did that might have been the most eye-opening thing I saw yesterday outside of Mississippi State's offense.
Two things that stood out to me was how much better Arkansas looked on defense. They were actually playing pretty well.
First half,
for a half, and then talent kind of took over. And what about Florida? Kyle Trask and
six touchdown passes.
Yeah, I mean when he's on, and boy, you give him time, he's going to do a lot of damage. I mean he's probably in the early Heisman watch now.
I'm surprised, and I think it's a mistake that Dan Mullen continues to use Emory Jones. What are you doing? It's like throwing a series away when you put him in there. You don't need it. I would say this about Florida. Lane Kiffin's offense lit them up on defense. I bet Florida's defense doesn't look that bad the rest of the year. I don't think their offense looks that good the rest of the year either. I think you might have seen. I think it's going to be good, but 6 touchdowns and him throwing all. I don't think that's the real Florida yet.
That ties a record for a quarterback in the SEC in an opener. I think the Emory Jones deal is just trying not to let him transfer.
Recruiting promise.
That's just strictly how do you keep this guy happy and not poisoning the water and those kinds of things. But for me, the Georgia and Florida were the two biggest surprises. Georgia looked very beatable by a number of teams. I mean, they did not look hands down going away like a team I would start going. They had holes, they had gaps, they had things you're going, okay, we can game plan against this team. It's not a roll the hat out on the field and they're going to win. Florida, on the other hand, as much as you say they may not be as good, they're good.
Oh, I think they'll be good. I just thought they put it all together on offense and they looked horrible on defense. I bet that evens out.
Put it this way, it looks like a Florida-Alabama race right now. And I think that's where you're looking right now is can they challenge and continue to play as well to challenge Alabama? That's where I'm looking at right now that Georgia's out of that picture for me at this point. And it's those two teams.
Georgia, of course, wound up. They turned things on in the second half with a former walk-on who was playing quarterback. JT Daniel still waiting to be medically cleared down there, the transfer from Southern Cal. There's a lot of people in the state of Georgia who are thinking, well, once Daniel's here, we're fine. That's still a question mark, too. Nobody knows how he's going to play at Georgia. So there's no guarantees that he's going to step in and be Peyton Manning. Or in their case, Eric Zier. So they were more surprising to me than I ever anticipated because I thought their issues looked more than just quarterback as well.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought even if they didn't get great play out of the quarterback, they could at least run the ball all over Arkansas, and that didn't happen either. So they didn't have a great average on the ground. And I just thought, and I think one of their touchdowns in the second half was a defensive touchdown, wasn't it? So that was a huge surprise to me to see how much they struggled. And then you had Alabama. That score against Missouri is pretty misleading.
Right.
It was
35-3 at one point, wasn't it?
Early second half it was 35-3.
But Missouri scored late. And what about Kentucky?
Yeah, that's the one game we haven't touched on. Tennessee plays both of them.
I mean, they had to feel like they let that slip away. I mean, right there at the end of the half, you get it down there on the goal line, and it just goes haywire on you because you can't run it. You know,
Well,
you
I
try to
thought
throw
they got in for a touchdown.
Well,
I did
I
too.
thought it was a touchdown.
I did too.
Wasn't that weird to call the forward progress was stopped
And then
by the Kentucky
turnover
running back?
that should have been a pick six, and they called targeting there. I didn't like either of those calls at the end of the half there.
If you're a Kentucky fan, you're going, there's the Kentucky football right there. Oh, what it takes to lose the game.
I think that Mark Stoops has done a tremendous job at Kentucky, considering all he's up against. You look at their numbers, he's now recruiting Ohio, second best to Ohio State. It used to be Michigan, and a lot of Big Ten teams would go in there. Kentucky's tearing it up in Ohio. They're doing really good. He can't get a quarterback. If he could find a quarterback, and I'm not talking about last year's receiver who played quarterback. I don't think Wilson is the guy. I wouldn't look at Kentucky and think they're going to max out with Wilson. That's a guy that I look at Garantano and people scream about him here. I'd take Garantano over Wilson. Not impressed with him. What about Auburn? What do you think about the Tigers who Tennessee will face this year?
I think Bo Nix looked good. I think he's got a good collection of receivers, too. I think the Williams kid is a really good football player. He's also got Schwartz, who's one of the fastest players in college football. So I think they've got a nice array there. The thing about them is their run game. And most of the time when Gus Malzahn has his offense purring, he's got a really good run game. I'm not sure if it's there yet. I think their offensive line lacks a little bit. So I think that there's some limitations with their offense until they can get their run game going.
And they have a lot of new starters in the secondary, correct? And they seem to play really well. They made some plays that made you think, wow, they got athletes back there.
All right, now Tennessee has Missouri next week. We'll save a little. We'll let Chuck go there in his Cavaliers line segment a little bit later. So let's talk about the one game that Tennessee doesn't play either of these teams. Talked about it a little earlier. Mike Leach and the incredible performance from a transfer quarterback in this COVID year to have installed his offense and thrown for 600 yards in week one. I knew LSU was going to be taking a step back.
Yeah.
I didn't think Mississippi State would be capable of taking a step forward like that this early in the season.
I agree completely. And then the thing that stands out when you watch that, he's got receivers running open all over the place. The crossing routes, whatever they do, their route tree is complicated, and those guys have picked it up. And I'm like, I don't even know who's this guy Mitchell? Well, he caught 8 passes for 180 yards. That's who he is. And there was a guy named Peyton. It was a guy that Tennessee had recruited a couple of years ago. He had over 100 yards. But the way he runs that offense, it is extremely difficult to defend. And what Costello did, you got to think he wished he'd been with Mike Leach for 3 years.
Right,
by
before
now.
coming at Stanford,
Yeah.
before coming here. Thoughts on LSU, Mississippi State?
Yeah, it's a tough offense to go up against. You know, I look at that, and you have to be, every one of your guys has to be on their A game playing. You know, he's always looking at also matchups. So where you're going to struggle is getting a linebacker on somebody that, you know, basically if you don't get pressure and get the guy on the ground with a certain amount of time, that guy's going to be open. So when you play a Leach team like that, it's ball control game. And then we've got to get to the quarterback and mess with his head. We got to get him on the ground. If you can't do those things, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, and he had the quarterback had 2 or 3 bad plays go against him in a short span and bounce back from that. Yeah. And that's another thing you look at and go, wow.
We got to catch a break. We didn't mention him here, but I will say Lane Kiffin did a good job getting his offense ready for week 1, too. That Egg Bowl is suddenly going to be must-watch television this year.
It could be a triple-digit over-under.
I mean, that's the thing. Whether Leach has success, big-time success in this league, I don't think he will, but maybe he does. Whether he does or not, I think it's great having him in the SEC. It's fun. You know, if they just hired another retread coach who was running another spread offense, I like having a league where this team runs a spread, this team just throws it 65 times a game. Give me a mix. So it's fun to have him and Kiffin in the league, I think. All right. Very good. When we come back, I got 3 more questions on the Volunteers. Then we're going to do the Cavaliers line. Come on back on the Sports Source.